Yeah, yesterday like we covered, installation part. Basic steps for, the steps, various steps involved in UiPath installation, community edition, as well as the Visual Studio. There is also community developers edition. Okay. Today we will be seeing some basic features of, C#.NET, because this UiPath is similar to that. Like if you understand any programming language, so it is very easy to understand UiPath. Okay, so it will be like more or less any any RPA technologies, it's similar to this only. Like either you learned VB.NET or C#.NET or like Java, Python, it is more or less similar to that. Okay, but except that these languages are, these traditional languages are like object-oriented, based on object-oriented technology. They in those languages, we will be developing the objects. So objects will be developed by class templates or classes. Okay. Here, that class concept is not there, but most of the internal parts, it will be like objects only, like which have been built on top of classes. Okay, right now you don't worry about this concepts. Okay, just try to understand, actually try to listen, try to just follow that. Okay, and let me share my screen. Are you able to see my screen?
Yeah, yes, you know.
Yeah, this UiPath is built on top of .NET framework only. So just I am just covering some few concepts, few basic concepts, which will be like so these concepts we will be using in UiPath development during development of UiPath bots. Okay, so C# is one of the most popular development language. It's a .NET framework language. Okay, all the frameworks, all the .NET framework is built on top of the C# language only. Okay, so there are a .NET framework supports almost 60 languages, but entire .NET framework is built on top of using C#.NET. So that is the reason C# is more popular among those .NET languages. It has been evolved from C and C++. C++, C is the most the most legacy language, and C++ is the extension of C language, and C# is like developed on top of these two, C and C++. Okay, that is the history of C#. And framework means, .NET framework means there are libraries are available. Libraries in the sense, libraries will be having some predefined methods, pre-compiled methods inside that. Okay, so we can actually, any user can refer to the library and use the functionality, because it is already like it's a build, and it's already build block. It's already pre-built block. Class library is the combination of multiple building blocks. Okay, it is already having a pre-compiled and predefined. It is, the code is ready to use. So class library, so we need to understand the class library. Okay, because in any language or any UiPath or any RPA technologies, we will be using the references to the class libraries which have been already defined, and it is pre-compiled language, pre-compiled code. Taking for example, in strings we have various operations like string, append, string, split, searching in the string, and there are splitting, counting the length of the string. So those are all some examples. Okay, these functions have been defined in the library, in the class library. Okay, that is a reference actually. So that way, like So class libraries have very much importance in any kind of language or any kind of tool. There are various types of applications can be developed using .NET framework. So desktop applications, or like we can call it as a Windows applications, or web applications. Mostly, like you will be aware of web applications and mobile applications, web services, class libraries. Class libraries they are not actually self-executable. So rest of the applications are self-executable. Okay, so we can run that application independently, whereas class libraries are referred in other applications, in web services, desktop applications, web and mobile applications. Okay. And any language or any development program or any development package will be like having some primitive data types and some object based variable types. Okay. Here in .NET framework, we have variables like string, integer, double, array, list, dictionary, data table, data set, and there are so many other things. Okay, so but these are all actually like most popularly used variables. Okay. String builder is another object, so which involves which helps actually by doing the string operations. String operations like a split, append, and there are so many things. Okay, so I will show you in the Visual Studio. Let me show that. Okay. Let me show how we can actually create a new project in .NET. Okay, that might not be required. Okay, just to go and Visual Studio. Just create a project. Click here. You're able to see my screen?
Yes, Srinivas.
Yeah.
You open Visual Studio right now.
Yeah. So creating a project. Just there are so many projects actually. Once you install, there are so many projects will be there. Class library, blank application, Windows application. Just I'm just going with Windows form. Windows. Here Windows form application. Just select this one. Go to next. Enter some. I just gave. We need to select one path allocation and just give the project name. Click the next one. Select the frameworks. Okay, there are various types of framework. I mean, this is currently .NET is 6.0 framework is there. So this is the latest framework. So there are previous from .NET 1.0 to 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, so it creates a project. You see in the yesterday when I have created uipath project, you see the similar structure of the files created. Here you see the dependencies. There also you can see the dependencies, right? Here some .NET framework dependencies. There uipath project related dependencies. Similarly, there are other files created, and one main file has been created like main.xaml XAML extension. Here you can see that program.csv is the main file. Okay, there are more similarities actually between this .NET, Visual Studio .NET and uipath Studio. So that is the reason, if you understand this one, understanding that is also, and why it is been developed on top of .NET framework, you will be able to understand, because we are using .NET C#.NET and VB.NET in writing some commands, not huge lines of code, writing some 1 or 2 lines of code actually in that. So that is very easy to understand also, like by reading those code itself. Okay, here this is a desktop application, or we can call it as a Windows application or Windows Form application. So there are controls, you can see this is a toolbox, various types of controls. Similarly, there are also like activities are there in uipath. So various types of all this shows all controls, but it is like category is actually given here on the left side. Common controls, containers, menus and toolbars, components, printing, and the data related actually mostly like data related will be like you see this grid view, binding source. Binding source means like referring to any database or any external data source. Okay, if you see common controls, there are button control, checkbox list, combo box, date time picker, label. Okay, so these are all the common controls which we see in our desktop applications and Windows or web applications. So by just familiarizing with this, how it behaves, if you familiarize with these concepts, how this Windows control or .NET controls works. So it is more or less similar to the same kind of development we will be doing in uipath as well. There in uipath, we will not be creating any objects, classes, but we are using objects actually. So that is the reason we need to understand these objects. Okay. So just drag and drop here, see button control you can see here. So how to write the, see in our any application we see click, right? When we perform a click on any web-based application or like any Windows application, it performs some operation, right? How that works, we need to understand how that works. Okay, so by clicking the click operation, click means that is an event actually. Click is an event. Any user, if any user performs any operation on any web application or mobile application or any Windows forms, that action is called a event actually. So I will write a comment. You see the button click. In the button click, this is a click event. Okay, if we quickly run this one, when I click, when user clicks on this button, right? So it performs some logic actually defined in this click event. So that is this is how actually background in the background it has been performed. Background count it has been it is how it has been executing in the back end. So similarly, if any drop down control is there, there are some list of items it has been there in that. So user will be performing clicking on the drop down control and select item is one event. Okay, if any item is selected by the user, that item will be like the displayed in that drop down control. And radio buttons, and in the grid view means a list of rows and columns. Okay, it's a combination of huge data. It's a collection of it's a data source actually. So some data will be from any database, from any table. It will be like pulled and it is copied and it is displayed on the application. Any web application or Windows application. Similarly, I have shown that button control, right? So we can see some basic string operations and integer operations, number operations in this other application. So far, any doubts?
Srinivas, I have two questions.
Yeah,
Is this .NET is open source or community based or kind of that?
it's open source. It has become open source now. See, .NET Core. Earlier, you might be hearing the .NET C Sharp, .NET, and .NET Core, right? These two words you might be hearing. .NET is like it is licensed actually. So earlier in the previous up to .NET 4.0, okay, 4.5, I think till 4.5, it has been like development only can be done in the Windows operating system with the licensing software. Visual Studio is a licensing software up to that edition. Okay, whereas the other languages, the Java, and they are actually like they are all open source. To beat the competition, for the development cannot be done in other operating systems. So to survive in the market, it has come up with the .NET Core, where the developers can use this Visual Studio in different operating systems.
Okay.
So that is the main difference. Okay, it is targeted for heterogeneous operating systems.
Sure. And right
Now it
now,
has become open.
Yeah.
Now
I
it
got
has
that.
become open source.
Right now, and now you showed me one button event, right? When you click on that button, it showed me it as an event, right? You yeah. So this is the background run when we select a dialog box in uipath, right?
Correct.
Is it
Same
like
thing.
is it yeah, okay.
Same
In
functionality. Same
uipath we have
functionality.
dialog boxes, we have message boxes. So this is the code like that runs backend, right?
Yeah, this is the same kind of, same code will be running in the background.
Background, got it.
Yeah, if you see program namespaces, right? Okay, I need to show the namespaces. You see that? Okay, this is using namespace. You are seeing the namespaces here, right? These are all the dependencies. System.text is the dependency. This is the reference it is being. You can see the different in the framework references. Core reference, .NET Core is having so many libraries here. So these libraries already, it is there in this program actually, but we cannot see that code, but it is in the form of binary format. So whatever we see the code here in front, right? So this is user written code, developer written code. This the message box is already there inside this program in the background. As part of the class library. See, there are C Sharp, Windows primitives. Okay, these are all some core libraries.
Yeah.
System.data is used
building blocks like that.
Yeah, correct. Already like pre-built code. This class libraries. These are all libraries. Okay. File system, input output operations. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
System.net. Okay, there are so many. You see this .NET Mail. Most of these are. I'm just highlighting the majority of the references which we are going to come across in going forward sessions. Manoj, you are able to follow?
Yes, I have to follow.
Yeah.
Sir, whether you running the uipath studio, the inputs are taken from VB?
No, actually, there we are creating the objects by screen scraping the web applications or using the existing applications. either screen scraping or some Excel application is there. It is already available in the desktop or system. There we are reading that objects and setting, actually like assigning to the some variables we will be going to define. Like here, you see in this example, string, I defined two variables, string 1 and string 2. String 1 actually we are going to define like one variable in the uipath, whereas this first, here we have hard coded the value. I mean, it has been hard coded, whereas in the real-time application, in a form we have a text box, we have some label. That text we have to read using uipath and set in the variable that we will be using in further processing in the bot or program. Right? Understood?
Yeah. Okay, sir.
This is the main, mainly in the uipath, we are going to read the objects and we are going to assign it to some variables and appropriate type of variables. Okay, either it is a string, integer, or some object type, string, different data table or something like that. There are different types of objects. We are going to read the objects and assigning into the defined variables, and then we will be using those objects or manipulating those objects or like making some operations on top of those objects to perform our business task or like the use case or the requirement. Okay. This is how mostly we will be doing it. Okay, but based on the logic, we will be like using the existing features of the uipath. At some point of time, we may have to manipulate one string and assign it to some variable, and that variable we will be using somewhere later in the bot. Okay, in that.
Okay.
So we will come across, actually slowly we will understand that one. If I tell in the beginning itself all the topics, all the things, then it is not, we might be getting confused. Okay, so we will understand slowly one by one. So once you reach up to the some pace, right, then we can actually increase the speed of the course also, like as per your understanding. Okay, based on your understanding, and if you are able to follow quickly, then we can actually like cover more topics. Okay. Okay, here you can understand. Let me just put a breakpoint. Okay, so any function, any coding language or any language, right? We can see like these kind of steps. Okay, this kind of coding is written in the form of this sequentially. It has been written and it has been executed. Okay, so while doing development, if you wanted to see like how that execution goes, we can just set a big breakpoints at a particular location. Then execution will stop at that point, and we can inspect what are the values have been, like how the values have been assigning to that respective variables, and see further. Actually, we can put breakpoints at various places. Okay, and we can remove also. Click here, and it has been removed. Okay, let me first see. I'll run this program. Okay, here you can see the execution of this program. Okay, basic features is the project name. So I click here. I defined one button 1. You see the button 1 name. So button 1 name property. I'll show you that property name. Okay, click this. So it when I click that one, so you see that control has come to here. It means when I click that button, execution is following this. Code has been written inside this button 1 underscore click event. This is the click event. You can see the event arguments. This is the standard definition of a button event. So now if you see, if you see how you hover your mouse on top of this variable, you can see the value here. Okay. If you want to change the value during the run, during the debugging, you can go and modify it. Now the value is first right. I'll make modified. This is how we can modify during the execution, but execution in the sense like during the debugging, like for the sake of any debugging, like for the testing purpose, we can make this kind of changes. Now, if I just execute this first statement, message box dot show, now we can see the first modified is there. So if we execute this one, you can see that's first modified. And space, I have given some space right here within inverted quotes, and string 1 and string 2 is it has been like concatenated together with a space. Then it has been shown. There is this is the other way of concatenating the string. Second first and modified first mod. I have reversed the strings. Actually, string 2 I have just moved to the front, and string 1 I have moved to the later position. Substring. So these are all the string operations. String operations is having, there are so many things. Okay, if we wanted to see what are all the string operations, just click dot on the string. You can see where there are various types of operations we can perform, like just append. You can understand as parallel. So those things you know. As of now, you don't require to understand. Just see what are all the other simple methods. You can see that cloning, contains means searches string or letters inside that string. Copy to count distinct by element. See, there are so many things. Okay, string operations. I used the concatenation. So if I select here, it is showing the signature of this method. Okay, concatenation, you can see here. Similarly, this is an example of the syntax of this concatenation method. Here we can define two variables, string variables, and then two or more string variables. There are 14 overloads are there. Sorry, 11 overloads are there. This method is having different types of overloading methods. I will explain what is meant by overloading later. Okay, just this can be written in 11 different types. 11 different types mean, in object-oriented programming, you might be like hearing the word polymorphism, right?
Yeah, yes, yes.
Polymorphism and inheritance.
Yeah.
Okay, encapsulation. Yeah. These are the three buzzwords. Okay.
Yes.
Now you see this this concatenation.
That means we can change that several different forms, right? Let's suppose we take a situation like we can change into different forms, right? From the beginning. Is it a polymorphism?
Not several types. Okay, not several types. See, this concatenation method is different behaving. It is having 11 types of forms. Means it is having polymorphism feature. It is having 11 features. Here we have given 3 variables, but it can accept different types of variables, different forms of variables. You see, string, multiple strings it can accept, right? This is one behavior. This is 9 out of 13.
Okay.
If you click here, this is another type of, if we have any string array here, if you wanted to concatenate that form, so it will have that behavior. Okay, it will take that arrays as the parameters. Suppose if we wanted to do some simple string, I mean 2 strings only, that is also like here you see that 2 strings. Here we have again only 2 strings. So that is also possible using this concatenate method. You see here argument 0, argument, I mean object. If we here we have given the string variables, but it will also accept object types. Which is object type means like it can it is of any type. Object type, I mean if we don't know the type of the variables, we can define that object type as an object. If we assign a number variable, right, it will behave like a number variable. If we assign a string variable to that object variable, it will behave like a object variable. Okay, that is how the object variable will behave. By just looking into this simple example, you will understand, you can easily understand like what is the polymorphism. So one method can be like overloaded n number of times. Okay, here it is overloaded 13 times. Means this concatenation method can be used 13 times. I mean 13 having 13 differently. I mean 13 types of signatures have been defined for this single concatenation method. Similarly, for different substring, right? If I click on the substring method, so it is having 2 overloaded methods, 1 of 2, right? Substring integer start and integer length, and another one is like just starting index. Okay, so see in any programming language, so one feature, one method we might be required in different ways. We cannot define one method like any method like substring 1, substring 2, substring 3, substring 4, substring 5. But this method overloading is, I mean that overloading concept is required for any programming language to achieve the polymorphism behavior. Okay, if I tell this using a just if I explain this in any just conceptually, theoretically, you will not be able to understand what is polymorphism. Okay, I will define one method so you can see, this is one method I have defined, a sum method, which is consuming 2 parameters and returning the sum of these 2 parameters, 2 values, 2 integers. Okay. If I go and define another method with the 3 parameters, so method name is same. Method name is same. There is no compilation error. You see, if I go and define some, I'll stop the execution. Here I want to perform some task.
Can you show that plus b that line again, the window? Yeah. Here that a private int that line is there, right? It is a Can you just can you tell me that a private int sum that line is there, right? What do we
See,
call that?
this is the method name. Sum is the method name.
Okay, sum.
This is the
Sum is
behavior.
method name. Okay.
This is returning. This has to either return some value or it has to perform some functionality. So this sum method is returning a integer variable. You see here, I is an integer variable, right? So that is the integer variable we defined. Private is a access specifier. This cannot be exposed outside this class. This is only, this is a class. You see here, this is the partial class. Form1 is a class. Inside this, this is the private method. It means within this class only this method is used. It cannot be accessed outside this class.
Okay.
Okay. Form1 is the class name.
So let's suppose if I start a program with a private expression, giving private, I cannot use the public within the private, right?
See, once if it is a private means what it means, like I'll tell you. This is a partial class, right? I'll go and just this is how I can define a object from this partial class. Okay. Public partial. We can actually define we need to define a separate class. I will tell you that, okay, in the classes.
Yeah, sure.
In the namespace, right? Okay. I'll just create one class. This is the method. I defined one class A, and this is a private method actually. If I define a public method, private means when we create an object from this class, it is being exposed.
Okay.
I will explain this concept in it. I mean, this is we have written in the form inside the form, right? I will explain this concept, private, public, and in a different example. Okay, tomorrow I will cover that. Inside this form situation. Okay, because if I create, if I create an object from this class, right? So only this this someone method will be exposed because it is been defined as a public.
Sure.
So private method, privately it is private method is, it has to be like used inside this class only. Suppose this method is also if it is this method, someone is using this some private method, it can be used inside this class, whereas this someone method can be used outside of this class. I mean, it can be accessed by if we create an object from this class A. So that is the difference between private and public. Okay, now so far what we covered some string operations, right? I will show you that this example completely, so you will we can see that we can see different, we can understand different basic features. I'm commenting this code. Let me expand this code. Here we have seen that we can see that string one and string operations, concatenation, substring, replace. Replace is another method. So where in the first string, right? String one value is first, right? Here we are replacing the character I with number 2. There is another method, another string builder object is there, so that can be used to append the strings. Initially we have one string, or we can actually append to that string n number of, I mean, different types of strings we can append, and formats, new lines. I mean, the required, in the required format, we can actually add the lines in that, and then once we display the whole, I mean, inside the string, we can actually see from toString method. ToString means it converts any object into the string variable. Suppose if we define one number variable, we want to show that variable to in the message box or like in a text box. Convert that string and number variable to string using .toString method. I'll show that example. First, initially, like we will see this example. Then I will show you that example. Basically, like we will be using that .toString many times. You see the first message box displays this string str1 and first and second. So later it is reversely. I have shown that concatenation in the reverse way, right? Substring I have shown. I mean, substring I used the substring. Let me put a breakpoint here. The substring I used inside the substring I defined number 2, right? It means it is displaying up to here, right? RST, right? And then here we are replacing from the string 1 with I with 2. Understood? In the this I with 2 we replace. That's the reason we can see this like this string F2RST. Here I defined one string builder function. This is a string builder object is already available in the .NET class libraries. I used that. I created one object, string builder object. In the first line, I added first, and /n is actually, if you define the /n, it is printed in the second line. So after the second line, you see the third. There is another method, append line is also there. So this method, it will add to the string which is already there inside this append. In the string builder, a new line, and then fourth is also printed in the the next line. Okay, here you can see that we can see the new line can be defined, I mean, written in two different ways, like /n or append line method also can be used. I mean, these are all the operations we will be using. Why I am explaining these things in this prerequisite class is like these methods. I mean, append, like dot show and substring, replace, concatenation. This will be like use. We will be going to use similar kind of methods in uipath. So I just wanted to give you a feeling like how from where and all these methods have been come and where and all these methods have been defined. Okay, it is built on top of the .NET framework. That is the reason. If you understand this basic features, how it behaves, how it runs in the background, then it is easy to understand actually from programming perspective. If you learn from the developer point of, I mean, any programming language perspective, any tool is very easy. It follows some certain guidelines and certain formats and certain syntax and certain some procedural execution steps. So I just wanted to give that as a prerequisite. So it is going to be more helpful in understanding the uipath in a better manner. Now, see this I mean, this is one event, right? Button click event. So whatever the logic inside it has been defined, it has been executed with the one click. If we click again, it is going to execute. Okay. Now I have defined another method, numbers, button numbers. Okay, basic numbers. So you can see that. Where is that method has been defined? Okay. That method is yeah, this is the button to number, button to click event. I mean the numbers click event. Inside here, inside this click event, I defined three numbers. Integer number 1, I mean A, integer B, integer C. I have defined with some initial values. Okay, here I have hard coded, but whereas in the real time, I mean real applications, these numbers will be like set by some values we read from the applications, either like an age parameter, like or salary parameter, or like some weight parameter, or some numbers actually like some rupee values or dollar value. Those values will be like we will be reading from application and assigning into some variables. Here I have defined integer variables, but whereas in real time it is like double or float. I mean decimal numbers. Decimals means it will be having some values after the decimal like this. Here I am trying to execute just some function. Inside the box itself I have written like this is the short way of doing it. Generally, like if you wanted to define like some, we can define some variable like int is sum equal to a plus b, and use this sum here actually like some variable and some value to string like this. Okay, understood? You're able to follow
Yeah,
me?
understood, Srinivas.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've just written in the short way, but it can be like in more elaborate way. It should be like defined like this. So when I go and continue, button click, right? So you see the sum value, it is calculated, it is stopped at this place. If we perform click right, if we perform OK, then it will actually come here. That control will come here. So this try catch block means any programming language or any language or any tool, we have to follow the error handling. So we might have come across during the programming or like when any user enters any wrong data, right? An error will occur. Error may come. That's a general scenario. But handling that errors without failing the application or without crashing the application is more important while developing the development of that application or that program. So by using try catch, I mean in .NET programming language or C# programming language or any programming language or any, right, there is a mechanism to handle this error. Generally, like many of the application use the try catch blocks only, like any traditional language like Java or like Python, .NET, VB.NET, C#, .NET. Even in uipath also, this is the same try catch blocks only it is being used. Okay, that is the reason I want to explain this try catch block. So whatever the block, I mean whatever the code inside this try block, this is the business logic or like the our requirement. I have written only one one output I am trying to execute in this try block. I am trying to execute a function dividing this variable b with c. So b is as a 20 and this is a 0 value. But here we will get a exception. That exception, if that exception comes, the programming will get error. Suppose if I define like this outside of the outside of this try catch block, we will get a error. But if we define a try catch block and put the code which may come across some errors, then this will be like this. Exceptions will be handled very smoothly, and the program or application will not crash. So we will be like I mean, instead of getting a generic message, I mean system exceptions, we will be like rename with general exception. I mean user readable format of exceptions. Let me exhibit this. Attempted to divided by 0. This is the exception. Actually, we got it. This is the control has come to here. And it is showing the message inside this exception. I will show you the exception object. It has passed, right? So that is the reason. It is, I mean, exception message is like this. But if you see, if you click the exception details, right? We can see here, right? The inside. What are all the exception? These are all the inside exception details inside this object. We got some exception divided. I mean, with the arithmetic operations, and that internal message is showing that it's attempted to divided by 0. This is the project name. Generally, in our production applications, we will be discussing about the production logs or error logs, right? So this message is actually logged into that logs. So I mean, the users can easily, I mean, the support people are like developers can easily understand, I mean, where the error has come, and where, I mean, what is the type of error that has been logged in. I mean, what kind of errors are there inside this program. Suppose, okay, this is done, right? So I will show you that what if you will not be, we'll put this outside of this try catch block. If we try to execute it, if we click this one, you see this is the kind of exception we got. This is a runtime error. Actually, we will not be able to see this in the. So this is the runtime. During the runtime, we'll try to execute this program. So this is the runtime exception. You see, when this is in the runtime mode, not in the debug mode. This kind of errors can be handled using the exception block. I mean, try catch blocks. see, you are a user. I mean, you are a user. You are allowed. I mean, you have given this application to use it. Okay, so if you that particular user goes and select this button, and then if he get this error, like he will not be able to understand, right? Now I will go and change this application. You see how I can actually how we can actually handle it in a better way. This kind of exception. I will define this object. I will define this code inside the try catch block, and we got some message, right? So we can actually change this message. Okay. I changed the message. This is the custom message we defined. Now I go and run this program. I got the first one, and now see the error is due to the number is divided by 0. So this is the user readable format. Okay, he can understand that. User will understand. Okay, so I have given the 0 as the denominator. Okay, this is how we can actually handle the exceptions. Similarly, we will be handle the exceptions in uipath. Okay, so today we will stop here. So let me know if you have any questions.
Srinivas, I will practice whatever Sarva said regarding these things in Visual Studio, taking some basic examples.
Yeah, basic examples you can practice. Okay, just to try to understand. Okay, this is how it has been defined. I mean, this is the internal way of. I mean, uipath also works similarly inside. I mean, in the background it works similar to this. So if you understand this one, it is easy to understand that one as well. Okay. So in the next session, I will be covering about the control statements. I mean, control statements. I mean, if else, for loops. Okay, those will be used actually. I mean, very much useful in uipath. So those topics I will be covering in the next session, and the remaining I mean, maybe next to 2 sessions I will be completing these prerequisites. So after that we can start the uipath I mean concepts, regular course.
Sure.
Manoj, you have any
okay,
questions?
sir.